It's very common in English for a verb to be followed by one or more prepositions. This is a complicated area of the language. Grammar websites and textbooks generally make a distinction between phrasal verbs like he put on his hat, where we can also say he put his hat on, and prepositional verbs like he sat on the chair, where the word order can't be changed. You'll also notice the difference if we replace the object with a pronoun. He put it on. He sat on it. And another way of seeing the difference is by seeing whether what comes after the verb works as a phrase without the verb. So, on the chair works, but on his hat doesn't. Generally, it's considered that in the case of phrasal verbs, the word that looks like a preposition isn't really a preposition and is best thought of as a particle. But there's a lot of confusing and contradictory information out there. These little words have a lot of labels. They can be prepositions, or particles, or adverbs, or adverb particles, and sometimes other things. But does it really matter? I don't think it does matter very much, and I'll explain why in a minute. But there's also a lot of confusion about the way these words, prepositions, particles, whatever we want to call them, interact with verbs. And I'll just say a little bit about that before we move on. One popular website says a phrasal verb is a verb like pick up, turn on, or get on with. But you'll notice that while we say pick it up and turn it on, we say get on with it, with the pronoun at the end. Are they just not making the usual distinction between phrasal and prepositional verbs here? Or are there different types of phrasal verbs? Another website says prepositional verbs are intransitive verbs because prepositional verbs cannot take objects. But yet another website says the preposition in a prepositional verb is generally followed by a noun or pronoun, and thus prepositional verbs are transitive. The standard explanation, and the one I would favour, is that prepositional verbs take a complement rather than an object, but even that presents difficulties. If we say Tom has gone to the shop, we can see that the shop isn't really an object in the sense of something that is acted on. So it seems reasonable to give it a different name and call it a complement rather than an object. But if we say Tom has spoken to his friend, the friend can be thought of as a kind of object. And we can see the difference from the fact that we can make a passive sentence, his friend has been spoken to, but we can't really say the shop has been gone to. These kinds of inconsistencies make things very difficult for learners of English. Part of the problem, as I say, is that this is a difficult area of the language. For example, if we want someone to hurry up, we can tell them to get on with it, but when we want to finish something quickly, we might say we want to get it over with. How should we explain the difference? And should we even try? How often are students likely to come across a structure like getting something over with? Complex explanations of unusual structures can quickly lead to diminishing returns. We need to keep a sense of priorities and focus on simple explanations that cover a wide range of cases. As long as it's clear that that's what we're doing and that there are some cases that fall outside our explanation, it's fine to keep things as straightforward as possible. So, Bearing in mind that there are going to be some exceptions, let's try to find a simple approach that will cover most cases. I don't think we need to spend a lot of time thinking about whether words like up and down and in and on are prepositions or particles or adverbs or whatever when they're in combination with particular verbs. And I don't think it matters much whether what comes after the verb is considered to be an object or an adverbial prepositional phrase or anything else. From a practical point of view, all we really need to worry about is whether the verb and the preposition or particle or whatever you want to call it are separable or not. We can say he took off his hat, or we can say he took his hat off. And if we replace his hat with a pronoun, we have to say he took it off. We can't say he took off it. But if we say he stood on the table, we can't say he stood the table on. And if we replace the table with a pronoun, we have to say he stood on it. We can't say he stood it on. So those are two basic patterns, and we can easily find dozens or even hundreds of examples. And the amazing thing is, even if you're not a native speaker of English, you can probably sort out which examples follow which pattern. Try it. Here are the two basic patterns. How did you get on? Of course, sometimes the meaning may not be clear, but that's the same as any vocabulary. If you don't know it, you just have to look it up. That's what dictionaries are for. But I've found that somehow the structure, the pattern, is usually clear to students, even when they're not sure of the meaning.